Another challenger. Mortal flesh is so fallible. Twin-tip dazzling display of survival. Grasp your mortality tightly. Oh, worth the effort. Cascade of pain. I require aid.
Hand of justice. I am the law.
Mortal flesh is so fallible.
Your sentence is
Until next time. Time to up the stakes. Time to up the temporal tears. A glorious spectacle.
I felt something.
Yo, what up? My name is Waffles, but my friends call me Waff. And this time, I'm bringing you the Giga Boss Killer of the League. This is the build I think I would recommend as a league start. You know, move over DD, move over Bone Shatter, because I think we finally have a new contender in the arena. And that's because Penance Brand of Dissipation does a lot of fucking damage with pretty garbage gear. And just like good meta, good league start builds, you can play them as different ascendancies and different ways, like poison or crit, and you know, all those variations. And that's the sign of a good skill. Now the reason this skill is so strong is the way it works, and I'll break it down real quick for you. Basically, get a lot of cast speed, and it makes it tick faster. The faster it ticks, the faster it hits its threshold, and its threshold is really high, going up to 600 to 1200% more damage, which is absolutely fucking ridiculous. Which is just a fancy way of me saying the version you're seeing kill all these bosses is 13 million DPS up to 26 million DPS, and I'm not padding the POB. That is legitimately the numbers that I can show you. But so you don't get baited, just think 13 million in your mind is the DPS. Don't think 26. But with all of that damage and all the tankiness you can imagine from different ascendancies and variations, I landed on a Hierophant, which is basically just a mix of high damage, high defense, and I was happy with it. I farmed invitations with 70% quantity literally the entire time. And I did every boss I had access to, except for Ubers, and that's because I'm bad. It's a skill issue, and I kind of panic when I start doing Ubers or Pinnacle bosses, and I kind of freak out, and I'm bad at them. You know, it is what it is. You know, we all got our weaknesses. I kind of freak out against Uber bosses, so a build like this is good because it means I can freak out, fuck up, and still survive, which happened a lot. But just like a build guide I would want to watch, I would want them to tell me the cons and the negatives as well. So the bad. I have one bad. There's only one negative about this build, and it's going to be the same for every variation of Penance Brand of Dissipation you see. So it doesn't matter if it's poison, it doesn't matter if it's crit, it doesn't matter if it's an Inquisitor. They're all going to have a similar problem. And that's when you get to this super endgame Delirium Juice or Breach kind of, you know, extreme rolled map, you're going to get overwhelmed. That's just simply the nature of this setup. The way the skill works, it has to ramp, and these mobs have damage reduction, and they don't really let you ramp. And so you end up in this situation where you see me running around with my head cut off trying to fucking not die while I just try to get some footage of just hard mapping. Look at him. Look at that idiot. Panicking, thinking he's gonna rip. But this is it. This is the one negative I have for you. The mapping version is going to be an obliteration setup with explode, and for normal mapping, which you can see right now, is completely perfectly fine. And you can get more AoE than I have, you have other options. But for the actual super hard juicing map stuff, this is where the build runs into a wall. Outside of that, you have no problem for the rest of the game. For the rest of this video, I'm going to explain the crafting steps, your starter gear, the endgame gear, and the in-depth variations and things you can do that maybe even I didn't do. You know, shit like that, hopefully to make your life a little bit easier. Okay, we're in the configuration tab, and this is essentially where our damage comes from, and this is where a lot of people pad. Now I'm going to show you real quick, if you've never used POB, you know, you go over here to your tree, and you can see the various versions, whichever version you're on, that's the one you click. So bossing, then we go up to skills, bossing setup, you know, items, instead of leveling gear, now we go to the bossing setup here. By default, I'm gonna have flasks off because I think that's considered pad. Your flasks aren't permanently on unless you're a Pathfinder. Now first, energy pulse. Technically speaking, I have 13,300,000 damage on Guardian Pinnacle bosses, which is ticked up here. Technically, I'm actually supposed to have 25 million damage, which eventually could reach 52 million damage, technically. But for whatever reason, we can only get 10 stages with Runebinder on. Now, Runebinder does not say it's supposed to lower your max stacks. In fact, there's nothing that says this. This is either a bug or it's intended by Triple G and they just never told us. So keep in mind, there may be a bug fix down the road that doubles our damage, but as of right now, we have to assume 10 pulses for each brand. We have 2 brands on 1 target, so 10. All right, for the rest of this is all where your numbers and everything calculate to give you your damage. Power charges, it's a part of our ascendancy. We have a minimum of 4. Frenzy charges, I have a minimum frenzy charge craft on my amulet and my ring. I don't have 3. If I were to put 3 here, that would be pad. I don't have 14 million damage and I don't have 2 frenzy charges. This is how much damage I have, and this is how many frenzy charges I have. Endurance charges. These are actually already calculated into your resistances by POB, but I have it ticked here just so you understand, like, hey, you have this. Onslaught. We don't have onslaught consistently against the boss, and that's the situation I think is the most important, so I turn this off. Arcane Surge. On POB, this doesn't give us anything, but we do have Arcane Surge, so I have this ticked. The rest of this does nothing. Even if you have you hit with a spell recently, it doesn't do anything. But it's true, so I tick it. Up here, we have 2 brands on 1 boss, so I put 2, giving more doesn't do anything. And then number of brands attached to an enemy. If you pick more, it doesn't do anything. You lose a little bit of damage. It's not a big deal, but we have 2 on 1 boss, and we get a little bit of DPS increase. Is your skill targeting the branded enemy? Well, that's true because we only have 1 skill, and it's targeting the branded enemy. So yes, this is true. Now, last 25% of attached duration. This is slightly complicated, but let's just say, hey, this is double damage. So you do double damage if the brand is expiring, and it's a part of our ascendancy. Over here, basically what this says is that you have double cast speed if 75% of the brand's duration has expired, and cast speed is damage for this brand. So this is double damage, which means for the tail end of every brand we ever cast, you will do double damage, which is guaranteed. But again, I like to think of consistency. This is not our consistent damage against the boss. On average, this is probably a 2 million DPS increase. So if you wanted to do averages, you could say, well, this is technically 15 million damage. I'm not doing that. Let's just say, hey, 13.3, every now and then we go up to 27 mil. That's pretty cool. Is it enemy on low life? We're using punishment. With the way the brand works, the longer the brand is on something, after 3 seconds, you're doing full DPS, which is full 13 million. And at about that point, everything in the game is going to be at low life. So I run punishment. We also have a little bit of chaos damage, which means conductivity is not that useful, or at least as useful as punishment, which is 59% increased damage, generic. So yes, consistently, most of everything is going to be on low life. Is the enemy debilitated? If they hit you, they'll do 10% less damage to you for the next hit, which is guaranteed because we have punishment on them, so this is true. Is the enemy chilled? Yes, we have a little bit of cold damage on a jewel that I got on purpose, and this wheel over here basically says when you chill something, you reduce their action speed by 10%, which just makes bosses a little bit easier. And this is, you do 1% increased damage for every second they've been chilled by you, and that's forever. So you do 10% increased damage against anything permanently guaranteed. So yes, this is permanent. We just leave this at 0, doesn't do anything. If you go through the footage and you see the shock effect, it's 30% on Maven, which means I put 30% here. We do not expose, and it doesn't give us that much damage anyway. And we have Unnerve on our gloves, which means they take 10% increased damage. And that's it. That's why your damage is here. That's how your damage works. And from this point on, you should hopefully be able to copy these numbers and put your own numbers in and get the damage that you actually are doing. And for my next step, I'm going to make all this damage disappear, because we're going to go into the tree here and we're going to go to the baby gear. So you're leveling until 28. You switch this, your skills, magma orb leveling until 28. And over here in items, you go to leveling gear, which is leveling gear I used. This is the gear I use. You don't need any of this. You can level with whatever you want. These are just recommendations, okay? What I would recommend with though is if you're gonna level with Brand of Dissipation from 28 plus, you should probably anoint Brand Equity. It's a black oil, not that expensive, but you know, if you have a replica Karui ward or just any amulet that you think you'll wear until maps, I would say go ahead, anoint that. It's just gonna make your life a little bit easier with duration and having more brands out at once. That's it. Otherwise, no, you don't need 7 leak step. They don't give you more damage, but they're fun, so why not? For skills, it's just going to be the generic magma orb leveling. Until I know of a better way or a faster way, or until Tai finds a new skill to level with that's faster, I'll always recommend rolling magma ignite until level 28. So this is the setup. It's tried and true. It's proven. It works. If you have another way to level, knock yourself out, man. When you go over here to the tree, this is the leveling tree. This is the magma orb setup. Again, we have the Brand Equity anointed, and this is supposed to set you up right here. So you want to be right next to Runebinder and right next to Rune Smith, so you can get the brand masteries, and you level with brands all the way up, and you're completely fine. From this point on, level 28. So Penance Brand of Dissipation, bro. I can't be saying this the whole time. Penance Brand is level 28 skill. So you do this tree, you're level 28, take Runebinder, take Runesmith, whatever order you want. I don't care. You shouldn't care either. The brand's really strong. You're going to be completely fine, and I'm forcing you to get enough HP so you don't die through the axe. For ascendancies, it doesn't matter which one you take first. Take whichever one you want first. If you're going to run Arcane Surge as a support, this just gives you more damage. If you want more consistency with survivability plus a little bit of crit, take this instead. This would just make it so EO works. Or just take it at level 50. It doesn't matter. When you get to the mapping / bossing setup early on, it depends on which version you want to go for. I would probably obviously just, bossing version does more damage, so you run this. But let's say you wanted to run the mapping setup. Okay, so you're running the mapping setup and you're running mapping gear. From top to bottom, 100% you can buy all this gear. Nothing here is going to cost more than 4 chaos. I promise you. The flasks are going to be the same throughout every version because these are the flasks I want to run almost all the time. Here, a somber scepter for pen, and it also says on the top there, or just use an obliteration. It's up to you. If you want to focus more on mapping, use an obliteration. If you want to focus more on overall better damage and you just scale AoE on the tree, then just use this. If you have leftover essences and stuff, go ahead and use those. But every item here is going to have one thing in common, and that's whatever stats I have on here that are dark blue, those are what I recommend you roll. And then obviously the craft is what I would recommend you craft if you have access to it. I would recommend you get whatever 2 and then craft the 3rd. So what I'm saying is if you get spell damage or lightning damage and you have added lightning, then craft cast speed. Same thing with the other ones, right? If you have added lightning to spells and you have cast speed, well then craft spell damage / lightning damage, whichever one, doesn't matter. You can't go wrong. You just want 2 out of 3 and then craft the 3rd one, or buy this exact scepter I imagine for 3-4 chaos. It's not a big deal. And that's it. I would not recommend using any harvest stuff for this level of gear and on low item level non-fractured stuff. Everything here is cheap, easy. You should either have found something similar to this stuff, or you can just buy it, or you can use some whaling essences you found, smack them on stuff, and you'll get similar shit like this. Nothing here is expensive, okay? And give or take, this should be 500,000 damage, 600,000 damage already, just entering maps on a 4-link. Alright, we're going to go into the bossing setup. The mapping setup is actually a lot simpler and easier to just swap stuff out. So I'm going to explain the bossing setup, and this is where a majority of my time is going to be spent explaining. Ideally, you're going to use a Somber Scepter just for that pen. It doesn't have to be a Somber Scepter though. Unlike other builds, this build you can just get flat damage. That's also completely fine. I would highly recommend Fractured Lightning or Fractured Physical. Yes, Physical, because Penance Brand actually is Fizz converted. So you can use Fizz +1 or Lightning +1. It doesn't matter which one. It's actually guaranteed to hit +1. So let's say you rolled Tier 1 Lightning and Tier 1 Lightning damage to spells. You would do that by using an essence. You can guarantee, a Tier 1 Lightning damage to spells, and you would just click it over and over again until you hit high lightning damage or high spell damage. It doesn't matter which one. And you can guarantee +1. But if you notice here, this is 2 divines, this is 2 divines, this is 1 divine, and we spent 2 divines to get rid of the suffixes. This is a lot of fucking money to guarantee +1. I guarantee you it's much easier to just go buy a +1 fracture of any spell, lightning or physical on a somewhat high eye level base, like item level 80, than to do this. Okay, so don't do this. This is dumb. It's not worth it, even if it is deterministic. Just go down here, use the essences, use a fracture. You can use either Torment to guarantee, Tier 1 lightning damage to spells. Wow, that's lucky. Or use a woe to do spell damage, and then you just roll until you hit this Tier 1, and then you just craft cast speed with a fracture +1. It's much easier, much cheaper to just do this, as much as it may suck if you're frustrated. Or just buy it. I'm gonna say that at the end of all of these, just buy it. Alright, to give you a visual on this, you would use either Essence of Torment or Essences of Woe, whichever one, doesn't matter, and you would just click this, and we guarantee Tier 1 lightning damage to spells with Essence of Torment, and with Woe, we guarantee Tier 1 spell damage. And you would just click this until you finally hit lightning damage to spells really high, or vice versa. That's it. That's all you do. Once you do that, you craft cast speed, you're done. You have the same scepter as me. For me, this took about 2 divines, so your mileage may vary, but this is how I crafted it. It's somewhat deterministic in the sense that you're going to hit it eventually, and then you just got to figure out, are you okay with settling for Tier 2? And then the shield, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to show you exactly how to make this. I won't be doing it for the rest of the gear, but for these 2 pieces, they're just a little bit complicated and a little bit more specific in how you make them. So I'll just go in a little bit more detail on these. Alright, so you got your +3 maximum chaos res shield. This is a part of Glorious Vanity setup with our incandescent heart. So long story short, it just makes us tankier having this. So get this fractured on your shield. It gets us really tanky, and I'm gonna be honest, on softcore it's probably not that expensive, and even on hardcore, +3 was only like 2 divines. But again, afford what you can when you can. Now you're gonna go over here, you'll use essences, and you're gonna use Essences of Greed, and you just click the shield. This is it. This is all you do. You're looking for lightning damage. This time, it cannot be spell damage. We can guarantee +1 lightning if we have a high lightning roll. So you just click this until you hit whatever level of lightning damage you're happy with. Personally, I'd recommend at least trying to hit Tier 2 as long as you have currency, but use what you can. And I'm gonna go ahead and skip to putting this on here because I'm gonna have to sit here and click this for a while. Oh, what the fuck? All right, so you were clicking this, you got life, you got a lightning damage level that you're happy with, and you have an open prefix. Specifically, an open prefix. It has to have an open prefix. It cannot not have an open prefix. Wow, I said that really complicated, didn't I? Just have an open prefix, okay? If you have something here, you're gonna have to just annul it. It's a 1 in 4 right now. Sorry, there's no other way around it. You're just gonna have to do that until you finally remove it. From this point on, it's deterministic though. So it's 2 divines. Prefixes cannot be changed. So as long as you had an open suffix and 1 open prefix, that's all you need. Now you go to harvest and you go to add remove, and you add remove lightning. This will potentially save us 2 divines down the road or not. Either way, no matter what happens, you will get your +1. You have three prefixes that you are happy with, right? If you get lucky, what you can do is hit this and it'll remove a different suffix. So in this case, it removed the life regen, and now this saves us 2 divines. But if you get unlucky, it is what it is, it's fine. You just do this again, or just craft suppression. So if you're happy with the shield or whatever, you would just craft suppression here, and there you go. If you want to min-max kind of like I did, then you would go again. Prefixes cannot be changed. And you would just use an unveil orb. And then what I did is I crafted curse effect, increased effect of your curses, because this pops up a lot. It has a, I wouldn't say a really high weighting, but it does have a high weighting. And so what you're doing is you're trying to stop this from rolling, and then you unveil. So when you unveil, it will not roll this. So we're hoping for double damage, strength and dex, resistances, and in this case we got double damage, res, and strength. So in this case, if you want your gearing to be easier in the long run, I would recommend you get res. But you know, hey, I know, I totally get it. I went for damage, so you're probably like, no, fuck that, I'm going damage, dog. Totally understandable. There you go. You have double damage. This is the exact shield I have. GG. This took what, 3.5, 4 divines, maybe 5 divines. You know, I'll take a look at the price of the fractures, but minimum 5 divines ish. I don't know how expensive certain things are in certain leagues. The helmet, nothing complicated. It's just fractured suppression, and then I just rolled it with harvest juice and essence juice. That's literally it. Your alternative is to just get fractured life, and then just roll an essence with, you know, a resistance that you want, and then you just roll that until you get high suppression. Keep in mind, the higher the suppression roll you get, the more it opens up your charms down the road. So if you get high enough suppression, you can maybe afford charms that have less suppression with extra damage on them. But you know, that's a min-max thing. You don't have to do that. You know, at the end of the day, you're just trying to get your suppression max up. So yeah, I have 1% over suppression down here. So I needed all the suppression I could fucking get. Your implicits, fizz damage taken as chaos, just means you're just tankier against physical damage. And then cast speed as the other one, because cast speed is literally the most important stat for us. Incandescent heart. Basically what this is doing is that it's taking a lot of elemental damage. So every elemental damage hit you take will be put into your chaos resistance. So we run a glorious vanity, which gives us +5 to max chaos res. And then obviously, ideally, you would have a +3 maximum chaos res shield. So 25% of all elemental damage is going to be put into, you know, 83, 84, up to 85% chaos res, which just means you just take a shit ton less damage. So with suppression and this, you really shouldn't be dying to spells in one hit. It gives life, it gives good armor, and it also gives you 20% of elemental damage as extra chaos damage, which is just straight up more damage. It's also why we don't run conductivity, because we're doing a large portion of our damage now as chaos. But this is just overall a very good balance between what a fourth vow gives you and what like a rare chest could give you. These are probably not that expensive. You can get +2 on this, I imagine not that expensive, because there's usually not a lot of builds that run this. Your gloves, the implicits are mandatory. A nerve is 10% more damage. Suppression, obviously you might have to roll that higher depending on the rest of your gear, right? Not too complicated. Fractured life or fractured suppression. Roll with essences, roll with harvest. It's as simple as that, man. So boots are funny because you can actually guarantee movement speed on them. So you would roll, you know, essences or harvest, and you would get actually 3 suffixes you want instead of 3 prefixes like we did on the other pieces of gear. And same thing as last time, I'm just going to put the 3 suffixes on here that I would want. And so let's say we rolled it with, you know, dex essences, and we got, you know, tier 1 dex, we guaranteed. We hit tier 1 suppression, and we got a res that we're happy with. What you would do is this time you go prefixes, and you would do suffixes can't be changed. And that's another 2 div, and you would do the same thing. You would just unveil, and off the top of my head I can't remember what you would craft, but usually I just craft mana because you can't go wrong. And you have like it's like a 7 out of 10 chance to hit move speed every time you unveil, and there you go. You can guarantee move speed every single time. It's 9 times out of 10 you're gonna get move speed, so there you go. You can make these boots, they're deterministic, or in softcore you can just buy boots probably around 2 div worth around this point, but if you wanted to craft them, there you go. Amulet, unfortunately, same thing. You can guarantee +1 fizz on an amulet. The problem is that it's just mathematically not really worth it. It's cheaper to just buy the fracture fizz or buy the fracture lightning and then just use cast speed essences until you hit high life and a useful suffix. That's all I did. I rolled it with zeals until I hit high life and a useful suffix, and I crafted minimum frenzy charge. You do not need the minimum frenzy charges. It makes your life so much harder trying to get an open suffix and high life. You don't have to do that. If you want to, this is what I did because I just wanted to make them in maxi-ish version. But this cost me about it was 3 div I think for the fracture, and then it was probably like 2 div in essences. So overall is about 5 div total. Keep in mind you are dex starved and a bit strength starved, so you're definitely going to want either a jade and then your attributes somewhere. Just keep that in mind in general. The ring, same thing. Essence of Zeal, and I rolled until I hit something good. I didn't expect to hit tier 1 chaos res, but I'm happy I did. But to be honest, this was kind of a bitch to do without fractured. I should have got a fracture. I absolutely should have. I should have got a fractured chaos res or a fractured life, and then just rolled with cast speed until I was happy. Very similar to the amulet. If you need dex, obviously you would go for maybe dex instead. But yeah, same thing. Essence of Zeal, Essence of Zeal. Wow, what a shocker. Essence of Zeal. I put prismatic catalyst on this to get that extra res because I was just so close to not being overcapped on chaos res. And yeah, I just rolled this with essences of Zeal, another like 2 div worth of Zeal essences, and then eventually I got this. It's not amazing, obviously this one's better, but this was the last piece of gear I was crafting, so I hit the point where I was like, this is literally good enough. I can play the game with this. I'm happy. The Stygian, same thing, essences, harvest. I think I rolled this with rage essences, but that's just because I needed the strength at this point. This is probably the first piece of gear that you can viably just legitimately buy, but again, it's probably gonna be a little expensive. Do what you gotta do. The jewel. I would recommend you get your jewel with cold damage to spells here specifically. So life, cold damage to spells in any form, either while holding a shield or, you know, in general. And then something useful. You can get cast speed, you can get what I got, which is added lightning damage while holding a shield. But most importantly, you want at least that cold damage to spells here. Alright, the charms. Yeah, I had to change this real quick. This is the wrong calling strike, so now my suppression looks off, but still 100%. But you would want a calling strike charm with something useful. Unfortunately, the only thing really useful on this kind of a charm is suppression, which, hey, you know, suppression. Wow, I'm so sad that we got suppression on a charm. Yeah, it's fucking crazy that they put this on here. It literally is what enables us to run things like incandescent heart and low suppression on our shield. But yeah, suppression, calling strike. On our other jewel, we're going to be running an energized armor. If you don't know what this does, basically it just turns this energy shield into armor. So it says ES, that's actually just armor. So we're just getting a bunch of armor. We're getting even double armor here. And that's why we have 30,000 armor just standing in town. We're vibing. Pathfinder charm, suppression, and then gain % of physical damage as extra damage of a random element. Basically, we are actually a physical skill. Now we're converting it into lightning, but physical as extra is a huge damage increase across every build in the game that is phys based. So yeah, you just get suppression and you grab this thing and there you go. You just get more damage and you get one of the most valuable defensive layers in the entire game in suppression. Nice. Watcher's Eye. I went for just lightning damage with Wrath. I already owned this from my last build I played. Glorious Vanity. Interestingly enough, I mean, if you don't know what a Glorious Vanity does, it changes these, corrupts these. These don't do anything anymore. So now you have to buy them. It's a whole complicated thing. I would actually just go watch somebody else's video explaining how these work, but basically you get a Glorious Vanity of Zabaqua, specifically of Zabaqua. It'll change this gem, or not this gem, this skill from Pain Attunement to Divine Flesh. And this means all damage taken bypasses energy shield. That's fine, we don't care about that. 50% of elemental damage taken as chaos damage, which means 50% of all elemental damage you would have taken is now put into chaos damage, and then it gives you 5% chaos res. Which means if you scale your chaos res, you're just going to take less and less and less damage, while also simultaneously becoming essentially immune to chaos damage. The biggest variation about Glorious Vanities is these nodes. These nodes are all random. You know, I have just like armor and stuff here. The biggest node that's going to matter is this one. I have armor and phys damage reduction. This is really fucking good, but you can actually get better. What you can get is the Glorious Vanity here that has +1 chaos res and chaos resistance. I would recommend you get +1 chaos res max here, but you know, hey, there was 4 available in hardcore. I gotta get what I can get. This one was good enough for me, right? This one cost me 4 divines. And then last charm, same thing, suppression, damage. Mapping setup. Not a lot changes here. Here's the biggest thing about the mapping setup is that even though I haven't explained, you know, the tree, basically The mapping setup is just getting AoE nodes. So, you know, you drop this wheel, you get AoE, and then, for example, maybe your gear's really tight. Mine was. So I just grab some, you know, dex here, some res here. Maybe you grab a jewel over here and, you know, you lose some HP because, you know, softcore shit. I'm not throwing shade. I'm just being honest. You know, softcore shit. Fuck it. Go get a jewel. You can fix your res here. Or, you know, if you're having res issues, you can just wear a Quicksilver with elemental resistances. That's what I did. And there you go. You're just getting AoE. Fix your dex or attributes or whatever. And the reason you do this is because we're going to be switching our ring from, you know, the ruby ring, and we're switching it to a conductivity on hit ring. This is a crusader item. You can buy this. You're just looking for life and whatever suffixes you need. You know, you're mapping. We're not bossing here. And what this does is you can run explode charms. Now, so, you know, let's say you drop Calling Strike or whatever, you know, whatever order you do it. But basically you can get this, which, you know, if you lose a little bit of suppression or something like that, I mean, hey, figure it out, right? This is where your gear dictates what you do here. Maybe, you know, you anoint instead of brand equity, you go and you anoint a suppression wheel or something down here, and you can still stay cap suppression. That's what I did. You can do whatever version or variation you want. At the end of the day, this build is really fucking tanky, and you're probably fine doing whichever variation you're happy with. But if you run this plus an obliteration, that means you now have 13% chance to explode an enemy for a quarter of their life as chaos damage. Yeah, that's the Profane Bloom from Occultist. And then you're wearing an obliteration, which is 20. So you can just get 33% chance to explode. And then you could run another one of those. And then another one of those if you want. It's up to you. You can also just take the shield off and put on another obliteration. Look, you can do whatever variation you want, however you want to make it work. This is what I did. If you want to make this, you would just use Harvest Blue Essence Juice, and you would just keep rolling it with Caster. And it's like a 1 in 8, kind of a pain in the ass to make. I would actually recommend you just buy it. But that's it. That's the mapping version. Obliteration, Curse on Hit Ring, Explode Charm. There you go. Going back to the bossing setup, yeah, so apparently I had the wrong Calling Strike here, so I actually have 14.4 million damage. So, you know, it's always nice when you have more damage than you thought you did, right? God, that sucks. How long? I wonder how long I was doing that, because I have two, whatever, it doesn't matter. You have enough reservation set up specifically because we're going to be running an Enlightened 3. You know, the tree is very basic, it's not too complicated, but the skills are a little expensive. Nothing special here. You know, your banner for your defense, your flame dash, brand recall for mapping, your penance brand. I do not have level 21 because I don't have a level 21. If you had a level 21 with my gear, you would do 16 million damage. And if you have a +2 chest, you would do 19 million damage. So for me, I'm sitting down here at this very lowly 14 million damage. However will I cope? Determination, Zealotry, Haste, those are our auras of choice. Keep in mind, in order to have this min-max the way I do, it has to be Enlightened level 3. If it's level 2, that will not work. It's not a big deal. You have a gigabillion of DPS. You can turn off anything. You can turn off Determination. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but I get it. Zealotry or Haste, and then just save up and get an Enlightened 3. It's really not complicated. When a build has as much damage as this isn't as terrible as you'd imagine. Mathematically speaking, you still have 12 million damage. You're just going to be a little bit slower. It's not a big deal, man. Wrath. This is your Divine Blessing setup. This lasts like 19 seconds. You forget to press it, to be honest. You don't. I'm just going to turn this off. You don't need this. I just vaulted stuff because I like vaulting stuff. And if you can think of something to put here, go ahead. I have some thoughts. I have, you know, Stormblast Mine with a level 4 Enlightenment, for example. That's a big damage increase, and that would be a huge DPS increase. This would make us go up to 17 or 18 million damage. I'm not going to put that in here, and I'm not going to explain it. And the reason is because it's going to feel like shit. Like, it just is going to feel like shit. And I didn't do it, so I'm not going to recommend you do it. Personally, I think that is really annoying to just put down mines when I'm not even playing a mine build. But hey, if you wanted to, Enlighten level 4, Stormblast Mine, Swift Assembly. Put the mines on the boss, put your brands on the boss, and they will just take more damage. It's really simple. I personally just didn't want to do it. And that's pretty much it. Although I say that, but I imagine this is still a lot of info. But hey, hopefully it helps you. GG. The next video I put out is going to be me MFing in cemeteries and making a shit ton of money so I can finally make my Arc Holly Fang build.